If you were to ask a American historian about this idea that, a lot of pundits like to throw around, that we are in unprecedented times, the political landscape is just crazy, and we've never had to deal with these kind of conflicts before. Most, if not all, historians are going to say, yeah, you're probably talking out your mouth. They would cite this idea of recency bias, that because these are recent events, you have more of an attachment, you have more of a fond memory of it, and you think it's more impactful, when in reality, in the grand scheme, this time period is not as impactful, maybe, or unprecedented as you'd like to think. However, after reading the book Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal by former Senator Ben Sasse, I've kind of shifted, sort of, so to speak, my view on this whole idea. So Ben Sasse, he's a senator from Nebraska, only a one-time senator. Um, his whole idea is, and something that I subscribe to, this is not original thought, but I'd like to share it with you, is this whole idea that there is a problem that's deeply dividing us Americans, that is at the root cause of every political problem. Think abortion, think inequality, think guns, whatever you want to, gun violence, whatever you want to attest it to, right? But he says that at the heart of every problem is loneliness. And what does that mean? Loneliness can be defined for a lot of people as this idea of social isolation, right? You don't talk to much people, you don't have many friends, what you have, what have you. But the difference, and why loneliness goes a step further than being alone, is this idea of lack of belonging. You know, we have people who live in hustling, bustling cities like Chicago, New York, and LA, interacting with a lot of people, but they don't feel like they belong. They feel like they're an outsider almost. And because of the trends of industrialization, and more so the internet, in my opinion, I think this idea of social isolation and loneliness has been the root of all, if not most, of our problems. And attacking that from the fundamental level is going to net us a much better future, um, for our society and for our country. But Ben Sass hits on three themes here. The one is the idea of that I already hit on, is that loneliness is the root of this division, right? I think the best example of this is this idea that we're not even looking at the same news anymore. Um, Back in the day, take your 60s, 70s, and 80s, even bleeding into the 90s. Everybody just had the three channels. You had CBS, NBC, ABC, and they had to follow some sort of laws to keep it as unbiased as possible. But then you had Fox News that came in, then you had CNN, then you had MSNBC running these 24-hour constant news cycles, and now you had people who lean to the right watching Fox News all day and all night, getting fed um, this echo chamber of just confirming their biases over and over again. Rush Limbaugh, who is this for all you millennials, I guess, or even Gen Xers out there, this man who would, have a radio show, just being a complete and utter advocate for the right, not ever acknowledging any other side or any other viewpoint. By that same measure, you had MSNBC and CNN confirming these ideas of, identity politics, that we are different, and if you fall into this category, if your gender is not normal, or you're a minority in this country, then these other people are to blame, and it's vice versa, right? The far rights of today are going to tell you that it's these illegal immigrants to blame, whereas the far left is going to say, these corporations, or this oligarchy that Ben Shapiro, Bernie Sanders likes to say, or even like white supremacy, or whatever the case is, they're going to cling on to this idea. And, you know, this problem sort of escalated even further, in my opinion, with the advent of social media. Now, what was once like 200-page book has become a 200 character a tweet, and the way that Elon Musk handles his app, it's all about engagement. And so if you say something with nuance, or if you say something maybe centrist, or not really revolutionary or crazy or whoa, you're not going to be rewarded by the algorithm. And so the only thing you see on your timeline is just the most radical and extremist ideology pushing you further into that belief system. And then the second point Ben Sass likes to hit on is this idea that politics has become an identity. This idea of identity politics gets thrown around us versus them, this idea of tribalism that, whatever comes out of this person's mouth must be ill intent, they're wrong, they're demon, we're going to demonize them, all these sort of things. And this obviously, like I said, it comes from the left and the right. This is not a uniquely one-sided issue, but this idea that you have to think a certain way because of, what the media or what a politician tells you, that no, you are feeling this way because of this, because of something, maybe it's your skin color, maybe you're a farmer, whatever the case is. It's always an us versus them sort of strategy that these politicians like to play. Fortunately for them, this us versus them strategy, gains them much more power, and they love it. They can't get enough of it because instead of us pointing the finger at the politician, it's me and my politicians versus you and your politicians. And at the end of the day, who's going to get that brunt force of the anger? It's the people on the ground, right? But yeah, and then this third theme is this idea of media and technology amplifying division, which I also cover on, but I can go into this more deeply, that these echo chambers that we have, it's not even just Fox News anymore. It's like only Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, or Harry Sisson, and whatever the case is. Like, you follow these leaning or right leaning sources, and even if, like Elon Musk confirmed himself, I think in a tweet, that even if you share a post that you don't like, it's at a point that you disagree, the algorithm's going to take it that you do like it. They're going to show you more, build up more animosity, build up more anger. So, this all has to do with this isolation. We understand why it's happening, but I want to also dig deep at, how is isolation affecting us, and how to heal from this tribalism and fighting back and forth, so to speak, of us versus them. But I think the biggest thing is this idea of the local community. Sass talks about back in the day how, in his small town in Nebraska, take 25,000, not even that small of a town, you had every Friday night when there was a football game or a basketball game in the high school, everybody would come together. Whether you were super wealthy, a business owner, or you were a factory worker, or you worked as a doctor, a lawyer, whatever the case is, there was no divisions between people because we were all one community. This idea, and this is not patriotism, this is not nationalism. It's just, understanding that, even if we don't share a single thing in common, we still live and eat and survive and worship next to each other. So why don't we, embrace that? Why don't we understand that? Why don't we, like I said, embrace that? Why don't we? And he cites a mountain of evidence that says that local engagement does build empathy and a common purpose across cultures. I'm not asking someone to be super patriotic and support the U.S. at all costs. That's not the patriotism I'm talking about. It's more of this idea of like, we're on the same boat here. We are both Americans. Let's build one another. Number two, he talks about rejecting tribalism, which I already mentioned before. People are not their political labels. Never, ever look at someone and say, he thinks a certain way, she thinks a certain way. Don't already have this, this idea built into someone that they're a Republican, they're a Democrat. Like, what does that even mean these days? Another thing is seek out conversations with people who disagree with you. This, I think, is so important. Be curious. Don't be judgeful. I feel like, the Charlie Kirk method of like sitting at a college campus and debating students over, that's not fostering any curiosity. That's not fostering any nuance or working towards a solution. It's just him debating people using clever syntax to belittle college students who disagree with him. And then lastly, he talks about prioritizing citizenship over politics, which I really enjoy. This idea of neighborliness is a civic virtue, he calls it. Being an American means working together despite our disagreements. And I think that, to me, hits home more than anything. This idea of patriotism was most exemplified post 2001, after 9/11, where for a small period of time, whether you were a Republican or a Democrat, black or white, whatever the case was, we all felt a sense of neighborliness, like we're in this together and we don't know what the future is going to be like, but we're going to hold hands and work at this together, despite our differences, despite our thoughts and opinions, right? Obviously, post 9/11 hysteria and Islamophobia is its own category. I don't want to neglect that, but that in itself is a good example. However, I guess the problem is social media, 24/7 news cycles, these podcasts, these engagement baiting, political talks, all of these sort of things have ruined it completely. I don't think there is really a natural hope for neighborliness that Ben Sass likes to call upon. And I think a great example of this would be after COVID, or during COVID at least, people thought, maybe historians were like, maybe people are going to come together, maybe we're going to see common purpose, right? But didn't happen. Um, so yeah, in conclusion, so to speak, I think he doesn't offer easy solutions. That's one criticism of SAS. However, obviously it's not going to be an easy solution. Do I think passing a bunch of legislations over and over again is going to heal this country? The answer is no. It's an attitude, it's a mindset that we need to call upon ourselves and other people. Like I said, for example, I think this is very similar to recycling initiatives, right? If I just were to recycle one plastic bottle myself, is that going to do a whole lot? No, but it's the aggregate. It's the working together. Everybody pitches in a little bit to make this country good and make this country great. Um, you know, he says choosing community, humility, curiosity over outrage and isolation. Perfectly said, in my opinion. This idea of loneliness has led people to massive issues such as gun violence, obesity rates, mental health, mental illness, all these sort of things. And, people are always looking for ideas of like, if this law gets passed, if my president wins, if my congressman wins, whatever the case is, you know, everything would be better. But the answer is that's not the case because it happens time and time again, but it never works out how we envision it. So, and that goes to show, right? Like, do you think if your political party of preference had all the power in government, we would be better off or everything would be perfect at least? The answer is no. So, it really, I made videos about the past that, the power is within us. Don't look necessarily, obviously, your politicians have power to enact laws and so forth. But if you want to start, mending these divisions that are the root cause of a lot of our problems, it starts with us. And, I'm going to offer the JFK quote once again here. It's probably like my fifth time in my whole YouTube channel. Say, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I guess personally, I'll end off by saying this. I hope myself that I can be someone of change, someone of ending this idea of tribalism. And I really call upon my fellow Gen Zers like Harry Sisson and maybe even Charlie Kirk. I don't think he's a Gen Zer, but that's his political base. But I call upon these people to really take a hard look at yourself in the mirror. And besides the money, besides the likes, and besides the engagements, do you really want to see this country thrive? Do you really want to see this country heal? And if the answer is yes, then I think you would change a lot of the way you present yourself. But thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.